working to connect a region of over 600 new bridges between our lands.
ASEANINFOCUS on tonight's headlines. Morning in the Philippines. At least 16 lives have been lost in the devastating floods and landslides across Davao and Caraga regions. Our hearts go out to the families affected by this tragedy, and the Office of Civil Defense confirms 12 victims perished in a Mount Diwata landslide last Thursday. Gearing up for El Nino, the Philippines is taking proactive measures against the predicted El Nino dry spell. President Marcos has reactivated Task Force El Nino, a dedicated team overseeing mitigation efforts, and this task force will update response plans, monitor existing programs, and expedite crucial water infrastructure projects. Malaysian political tensions rise. Former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has criticized the questioning of his son by the anti-corruption agency, labeling it politically motivated. This incident deepens the existing rift between Mahathir and the current government. And a race against time in China. A desperate rescue operation is underway in southwestern China after a landslide tragically claimed 11 lives. Dozens remain missing, buried under tons of debris. Rescuers are battling freezing temperatures and thick snow in their tireless efforts to find survivors. And AI takes center stage in Davos. World leaders and business giants at the World Economic Forum in Davos are buzzing about the transformative potential of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman highlighted its geopolitical significance, while discussions explored the need for responsible development of this powerful technology. At least 16 people have lost their lives in recent heavy rains and severe flooding that ravaged Davao region and parts of Caraga last week. The Office of Civil Defense confirmed the tragic toll on Monday, with the majority of fatalities, 12, attributed in landslides in Mount Diwata last Thursday. 2 additional lives were lost in Davao City, while Davao Oriental and Davao Occidental each reported 1 death. The devastation has prompted the OCD to ramp up emergency response efforts. OCD spokesperson Edgar Posadas announced the deployment of additional personnel to assist in ongoing rescue operations. We've raised the alert status for our emergency operation centers in Caraga and Davao Region 11 to Blue Alert, he said, which means more personnel will be deployed to bolster rescue efforts.
First time na almost more than 600,000 people have been affected. Ang nahitabo niya ang vastness sa maong area covered by the disaster is something that we have to think seriously.
The mounting human cost and widespread damage have led 7 areas in Davao and 4 in Caraga to declare a state of calamity. And this allows local governments to access additional resources and expedite relief efforts for the affected communities. The Philippines is gearing up for the potential impacts of El Nino with the reactivation of Task Force El Nino, a dedicated government body tasked with mitigating the effects of the dry spell. President Bongbong Marcos signed Executive Order number 53 on January 19th, officially reviving the task force under the Office of the President. The task force, led by the Secretaries of National Defense and Science and Technology, brings together key government agencies including environment, agriculture, health, and economic development. The Office of Civil Defense will provide logistical and technical support. The task force has a clear mandate: revise and update the National Action Plan for El Nino, and this will ensure coordinated and effective responses to the dry spell, monitor and expedite solutions. The task force will track the implementation of existing programs and push for the completion of critical water infrastructure projects before April this year. Get informed and connected. A massive information campaign will raise public awareness about El Nino, while a dedicated online platform will centralize data and resources. The Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration, or PAG-ASA, predicts El Nino to linger until the second quarter of 2024. Friction is brewing in the Philippine government over the International Criminal Court potential investigation into the country's war on drugs. Former Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo took issue with Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla's recent statement that the government wouldn't obstruct an ICC probe provided it follows legal procedures. Panelo strongly opposes any ICC involvement, arguing that the Philippine legal system is fully capable of handling its own affairs. He emphasized the government's exclusive authority to investigate and prosecute domestic crimes, asserting that foreign countries or organizations have no right to supplant that authority. Allowing outside interference, he argued, would be an assault to our sovereignty and a shameful surrender of our birthright as a nation. Panelo urged the current administration to uphold the stance of President Marcos Jr., who maintains that the ICC has no jurisdiction over the Philippines.
Let me say this for the 100th time. I do not recognize the jurisdiction of ICC in the Philippines. In fact, binabantayan namin sila, making sure that hindi sila that they do not come into contact with any agency of government. And if they are contacting agencies of government, na sasabihin yung whatever, policeman, local government, sabihin nyo, wag nyong sasagutin. Yun ang sagot natin, that we do not recognize your jurisdiction, therefore we will not assist in any way, shape, or form any of the investigations that the ICC is doing here in the Philippines.
The fallout from a corruption investigation is heating up in Malaysia, with former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad firing back at the current government. Mahathir accused the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, or MAC, of using the probe against his son, Mirzan, as a political weapon against him. Mirzan, Mahathir's eldest son, was summoned by the MAC last week to explain his business activities and declare all assets. The agency linked the investigation to the Panama Papers, a massive leak exposing offshore financial dealings and Mirzan's involvement in sales and purchases of government-linked companies. Mahathir, 98, and a vocal critic of current Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, called the investigation selective and politically motivated. He expressed concern for his son facing a 30-day deadline to disclose all transactions since he was 22, with a potential 5-year jail time for non-compliance. Critics, including Mahathir, accused the MAC, or MACC, of being used by the Anwar government to target political opponents. And this comes amidst a larger political battle between Mahathir and Anwar, who both served as prime ministers in the past. From war zones to climate crisis, beyond borders, beyond headlines, here are some of the stories shaping the world we live in. In a fresh wave of military action, the United States and Britain have carried out airstrikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen for the second time in 2 weeks. And this comes in response to ongoing attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea. The latest strikes, carried out Monday, targeted 8 Houthi locations, including a weapons storage facility and sites linked to their missile and air surveillance capabilities. The joint operation with other supporting countries aims to disrupt the rebels' ability to threaten maritime trade and endanger innocent seafarers.
Because we do not want to see commercial shipping, innocent mariners continue to be targeted, and our U.S. forces. So that's why you saw the action that we took earlier this morning and late yesterday to degrade and destroy their capabilities. But when the Houthis decide to stop, that's really going to be a decision that they make. And again, I mean, a completely valid question, but 10 to 15% of the world's commerce is flowing through the Red Sea. Over 50 nations have been impacted, many of which have no connection or affiliation with the Middle East. But the costs that the Houthis are continuing to occur to commercial vessels not only impacts the region, it impacts the entire world.
This escalation follows a series of Houthi attacks on commercial vessels and naval warships, including a U.S. military cargo ship that the rebels claim they targeted today. However, the U.S. vehemently denies hitting any U.S. vessel.
In terms of their precision and targeting, we have seen that these are not precise missile launches. They often land, they often land in the area where there are many ships. We can't say that, sometimes we can't say who exactly or what ship they are exactly targeting. So I think there is some imprecision when it comes to the actual targeting of a specific vessel. But again, it still puts many, many lives and many, many ships at risk when you have a ballistic missile traveling that way, that a commander is forced to make that decision in that moment to shoot it down in the vicinity of however many ships are transiting such a narrow waterway.
Family members and supporters of hostages held by Hamas stormed a meeting at the Knesset, Israel's parliament. They broke into security and a finance committee after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected what he said were Hamas conditions for the release of hostages, even amid mounting pressure from their families.
תנו להם להגיד מה שהם רוצים. תעזוב אותו, תן לו להגיד מה שהוא רוצה. תעזוב אותו. תעזוב אותה.
אנחנו לא אלימים. אל תפות, עזבי אותי. אל תגיעי בו. למה את רוצה להפוך?
תעזוב אותו, תן לו.
יש ילדים, אתם דנים על כסף.
אל תיגע בו. תגיד לו שיעזוב אותו. שיעזוב אותו.
את כולם! את כולם!
Now, Israel has proposed to Hamas via Qatari and Egyptian mediators a pause in fighting of up to 2 months as part of a deal to free all the hostages being held in Gaza, according to the U.S. news site Axios. The report, citing unnamed Israeli officials, said the deal would take place in multiple stages, the first of which would see the release of women, men over 60, and those in critical medical condition. Subsequent phases would involve the release of women soldiers, younger civilian men, male soldiers, and the bodies of dead hostages. The official said the deal would also see the release of an as-yet undetermined number of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israel, but not all of them. The proposal does not include promises to end the war, but it would involve Israeli troops reducing their presence in major cities in Gaza and gradually allowing residents to return to the territory's devastated north. About 250 hostages were taken during Hamas's bloody October 7 attacks, and Israel said around 132 remain in Gaza. And that includes the bodies of at least 28 dead hostages, according to an AFP count based on Israeli data. A desperate search continues in southwestern China after a devastating landslide ripped through a remote village early Monday morning with dozens still missing. Rescuers are battling against the clock and freezing temperatures to find survivors buried beneath the tons of debris. The pre-dawn landslide struck Chenchong County in Yunnan Province, burying 18 homes and forcing the evacuation of more than 200 people. As of Tuesday afternoon, over 24 hours after the disaster, rescuers are facing a race against time to find those still missing. The scale of the disaster is immense, with officials reporting a debris field measuring 100 meters wide, 60 meters tall, and 6 meters deep on average. State broadcaster CCTV showed dramatic footage of rescuers working tirelessly through the night, their headlamps illuminating the mangled metal and concrete. President Xi Jinping has ordered all-out rescue efforts. Landslides are unfortunately not uncommon in Yunnan, a mountainous region prone to natural disasters. And the cause of this particular landslide is still under investigation, but efforts to establish what happened are underway. The alarm bells are ringing over the potential delay of a vital international agreement to prevent future pandemics. The head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, expressed concerns that the draft of this pandemic treaty may not be finalized by May, the previously set deadline. Addressing the WHO Executive Board, Tedros warned of several outstanding issues blocking progress.
At the political level, world leaders at the UN General Assembly high-level meeting agreed a strong political declaration, including a commitment to include negotiations on the pandemic agreement and amendments to the international health regulations by May this year. But I must say, I'm concerned that member states may not meet that commitment. Time is very short, and there are several outstanding issues that remain to be resolved. In my view, a failure to deliver the pandemic agreement and the IHR amendments will be a missed opportunity for which future generations may not forgive us.
This stark warning comes after a global agreement to develop the treaty in response to the devastating toll of COVID-19. The aim is to establish a legally binding framework for countries to improve their pandemic preparedness, response, and access to critical resources like vaccines and healthcare. Papua New Guinea, a land of stunning natural beauty and vast resource wealth, is grappling with a growing crisis. Deadly riots in the capital, Port Moresby, have exposed deep-rooted problems of poverty, inequality, and a fragile security system. This story explores the forces behind the unrest, its potential consequences, and the challenges facing the nation. Here's Thomas I. Likeness for the report.
Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape came to power, promising to transform the often volatile former British colony into a prosperous, peaceful country. But to do so, the Pacific Island nation will have to shed its dangerous reputation. The latest violence occurred on January 11th. Angry crowds tore through the capital of Port Moresby, torching cars, ransacking grocery stores, and setting fire to buildings. Australian analyst Mihai Sora says that didn't help the country's image.
Violence on this scale and the looting that we saw will have an impact on business confidence.
At least 25 people died as the violence spread to other parts of the country. During the rioting, private security firms hired by shop owners found themselves in charge of safeguarding parts of the city. Sinclair Dillon is an Australian researcher who is focused on crime and politics in Papua New Guinea. He says the country simply doesn't have enough police officers. There are only about 6,000 officers trying to police about 12 million people. In contrast, there are an estimated 30,000 private security personnel. But Dinnan says the problem goes beyond law and order.
People don't have food security. People don't have the kind of security over livelihoods, over their sort of futures, how to look after their families and so on, as well as, you know, real genuine concerns about their personal security.
And it's that poor quality of life that leads to scenes like these. Analyst Sora says day-to-day living is not easy for people who reside in the capital of Port Moresby. He says those people face extreme financial hardship.
Cost of living is very, very high. Personal security is low. Services are poor. So it's a difficult place to live. It's a difficult place to make a living. And the country has, you know, a very well documented problem with law and order.
Human Rights Watch says the country remains a dangerous place to be a woman or a girl. That's due to widespread sexual and gender-based violence, as well as weak rule of law. Prime Minister Marape's goal of transforming the country, at least for now, seems to be a long ways off. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
As Russia's war in Ukraine drags on, a disturbing trend is emerging within its borders. A surge in violence across all levels of society. Olga Sadovskaya, head of the human rights organization Crew Against Torture, paints a bleak picture of domestic abuse, police brutality, and even violence against children, attributing it to the wider context of the ongoing conflict. Thomas I. Likeness is back with this report.
Sadovskaya says that violence of all types is on the increase in Russia. She says domestic violence has dramatically risen, as well as brutality at the hands of authorities.
We see the increase of violence in the prison institutions. We see not the increase of violence in numbers, but the increase of violence in terms of severity when people are arrested and beaten. And we see that the state agents have become more brutal.
She says violence is not an island. It does not exist in isolation. Sadovskaya says it can start in a neighboring country or on the battlefield.
When it's burned somewhere, it spreads outside the place of birth, and it spreads outside where it was created, and it affects all the society, unfortunately.
Sadovskaya is a lawyer by trade. Her organization, Crew Against Torture, has been around for 24 years now. She says they work with different kinds of cases that are connected to torture, to state violence, torture in psychiatric institutions, by police, and in prisons. Sadovskaya says sometimes it even happens in schools and kindergartens. She says her group investigates because the government tends to do nothing.
Because the situation in Russia looks like this: when the person complains that he was or she was subjected to torture, usually the state refuses to investigate the case. They usually say that nothing happened, we haven't found any witnesses, we don't know what it was, but it wasn't torture. And what we do is we investigate the allegation instead of the state.
Sadovskaya's comments come ahead of a UN Committee on Children's Rights, which will grill Moscow on its treatment of Ukrainian children believed to have been sent to Russia by force. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland was abuzz with the term artificial intelligence this year. From world leaders to corporate giants, the focus was on the breathtaking advancements in generative AI and its potential to reshape our world. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman took the stage to discuss its growing geopolitical significance as nations grapple with the rapid development of this powerful technology.
To all the obvious lessons that you don't want to leave important but not urgent problems out there hanging. And we had known that our board had gotten too small, and we knew that we didn't have the level of experience we needed. But last year was such a wild year for us in so many ways that we sort of just neglected it. I think one more important thing, though, is as the world gets closer to AGI, the stakes, the stress, the level of tension, that's all going to go up. And for us, this was a microcosm of it, but probably not the most stressful experience we ever face. And one thing that I've sort of observed for a while is every one step we take closer to very powerful AI, everybody's character gets like plus 10 crazy points. It's a very stressful thing, and it should be, because we're trying to be responsible about very high stakes.
Officials from China to Europe stake their positions on the need for responsible development.
The guardrails that we're going to need. The UK also plays a very big role in global security. We need to be sure, as I was saying to Sam earlier this morning, that a rogue actor isn't going to be able to use AI to build nuclear weapons. So we need to have our eyes open, which is why the AI Safety Summit that Rishi Sunak organized at the end of last year was so important. But we need to do it in a light touch way, because we've just got to be a bit humble. There's so much that we don't know, and we need to understand the potential where this is going to lead us at a stage where no one really can answer that question.
One exciting area of exploration is generative AI's potential to revolutionize healthcare.
We believe that it will be transformational in healthcare. We think the vast majority of the American public will buy into AI because of what they will see in the quality of life that can be improved as AI is integrated into healthcare. If we can do those types of things, then we can truly make a difference, and not just the bad things that AI could be a part of, but rather the good things that it brings as well will far outweigh the bad. If we do this correctly, we learn correctly, we provide incentives for AI development. And once again, in a competitive area, the United States is going to do their best to stay at the top of the competitive brackets, but also that we not harm our own citizens with unbridled AI that does not have appropriate regulatory oversight.
While business leaders see AI automating mundane tasks and augmenting human capabilities, they also acknowledge the risk of job displacement for those unable to adapt.
So there isn't an area, there's not an industry that's not going to be impacted. Because this will be a great technology if we can bring people along the journey, and we have to be able to reskill them. And we will not be able to reskill unless we think very differently about talent, both as a government and as a company. And we spend a lot of time, not because it just drives our business or that, but because fundamentally it's very basic. Well-paying jobs for people solve a lot of problems. And AI will create a lot of new jobs, but you won't be able to take the current people and put them in the jobs unless you partner together, government and companies, on reskilling.
Can you help make your accounts receivable? Can you help make your HR function? Can you help make your finance function? Can you help make invoicing, contracting, supply chain, ordering? As you go into each of these, it is not necessarily job displacement, but it is absolutely an impact. If you embrace AI, you're going to make yourself a lot more productive. If you do not, then probably I agree with the minister, you're going to find that you may not have a job. So you've got to embrace it. And as you go across these areas, and it is here and now, this is not 2-3 years out. You got to get going now.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.